to Arise Nigeria. We are witnessing the fallen giants. My name is Uguba Bakri. With us is our host, Reverend Peter Thompson.
Yes, I like your deep voice. Nobody will know you are my son. The way your voice has gone so deep. Well, like I said to you, this is Arise Nigeria, reawakening the fallen giant. And I think we were talking about the national anthem. We are singing the national anthem. I think one particular verse caught our attention. One verse caught our attention. Remember that it says, arise.
O compatriots. Nigeria's called obey.
I can't hear you.
Nigeria's called obey. Serve our father's land with love and strength and faith. The labor of our heroes past.
Good. The labor of our heroes past. The labor of our heroes past. Arise, O compatriots, Nigeria's call obey, to serve our fatherland with love and strength and faith. The labor of our heroes past shall never be in vain. To serve with heart and might one nation bound in freedom, peace, and unity. Now, the verse that jumps out there is the labor of our heroes past. And that's what I want to ask you right now. Who are these heroes past?
Of a truth.
Who do you know? Give me some names. You were taught in school.
Okay,
what have you been taught? Who are the heroes past?
Because I was going to say that we have been taught wrongly.
How do you know that? Tell me what you were taught.
What we were taught that the likes of Obafemi Awolowo,
yes,
Nnamdi Azikiwe,
yes,
and Sir Tafawa Balewa,
yes,
the documentary already stated.
Yes, as you were watching the documentaries.
Yes.
Well, are they not heroes past? Are they not? I'm asking you, are they not heroes past?
I had to unlearn that they are not.
Well, before we got to that, before I started talking to you,
yes, sir.
Before we started sharing about this,
yes, sir.
These are the heroes past that you know.
We all know it.
Now, what I know is this, listen, we need to be careful. When it comes to Nigeria, we need to learn some things because of the present state of the nation. And when you're talking about the labors of your heroes past, you better know your history. And there's something I want you to put in your right hand right now and learn this and hold on to it good. Once you are robbed of your history, you will settle for any future. The moment you are robbed of your history, you will settle for any future. So watch out. In any country, any family, any nation, once somebody begins to tamper with your history, begins to report your history falsely, they begins to tell you tall stories, somebody somewhere is planning something against you. Actually, it's a very devilish device. So talking about the labors of heroes past, the question we need to be asking ourselves in Nigeria at a time like this, a crucial time in the history of Nigeria right now, is one simple question. Where did the idea of a nation called Nigeria start? When and where? Like you pointed out, Awolowo, Zik, Nnamdi Azikiwe, that's what you've been taught?
Yes, sir.
Now, of a truth, these men are statesmen who have been a part of it, but the list of how Nigeria got to be a country, how Nigeria got to be where it is, the stakeholders, the people who invested in it, if we want to look at that list, we are going to tell you something. Very few Nigerians today have any memory that there was a time when what we are calling Nigeria today, and in fact the whole of Africa, were just territories from which human slaves were being sourced. In those days, if you look at the true history, no nation of the world was ready to accommodate the idea of black people, of Africans, people of our color, claiming to come from one country or the other.
Having a passport.
You see, today we are talking about constitution. Some people are, talking about amendments. Some people are talking about one thing or the other. And there's a degree of flippancy in the country that is amazing. And this is happening because somebody has stolen the history. In the days of slave trade, the darkness of terrible slave trade, it was actually just one set of people, the abolitionists, who came up with the idea that these Africans that you are seeing, they are not monkeys, these slaves are human beings. Because everybody had ganged up against the man of color. Looking at you today, we are talking about green passport, traveling, recognition. But your generation needs to understand something. The only way you could enter some parts of the world in the years gone by, in the 15th, 16th, 17th century, was if you were in chains on your way to slavery.
That's incredible.
It was an era of gross darkness. An era of gross darkness. This was the times when you look at the pictures, I'm sure you can see some of the pictures on display. You'll see that it was an era where slave trade, you will see that the Africans there, we should be showing you some pictures shortly. Some of you find that they will capture our people butt naked, string them up, brand them like cattle. It was an era of gross darkness. This was the only way, this was how black men were treated. Nobody in the world wanted to see a black man as a citizen of any nation. So even the idea of Nigeria did not even come. Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, please forget about it. Who was even thinking about any such thing? It was an era of gross darkness, and it started with, let me tell you something, the Trans-Saharan slave trade was the one that it started with first. Crossing the Red Sea, the Indian Ocean, and the Sahara Desert, between 650 AD and 1900 AD, an average of 15 million Africans, black men, were taken to slaves as slaves to the Arabian Peninsula.
15 million.
15 million. What they liked a lot, if you look at some of our visions there, the slaves that attracted the greatest prices were young girls, young virgins. For the men who were taken in there, they were castrated usually to go and watch over the harems, or they would use them to work somewhere in the fields. So you see, the Arab slavers had a field day. The greatest corruption of all in life is the devaluation of human worth. So when a human being has been reduced to the level of an animal or for a beast of burden, is being sold and bought, like, just like cows and goats. At that time, nobody was thinking about Abuja and legislators, talking loftily in Abuja. Apart from the Arab slave trade that started in 1650 AD, we had the transatlantic slave trade. This started during the 15th century. I think it was Antão Gonçalves, a Portuguese trader, that was the first African slave. But once the trickle started, and the whole of Europe would come here. They bought our people. Nothing less than about 25 million were shipped from West Africa.
25
I am telling you, they were shipped from here. Everybody was enjoying. The profits were greater than cocaine profits.
Wow.
The profits were much more than cocaine profits.
From slave trade.
Yes, was greater than cocaine profits. And you will find out that even when the people began to think of African nations, began to fight on our behalf, King Gezo of Dahomey, now Benin Republic.
Wow.
You can imagine what I'm saying here. King Gezo, as far as he was concerned, he said, look, you know what? Let me tell you what he said in the 1840s. He said, anything the British want, I'm going to be able to do for them. Apart from giving up slave trade. The slave trade is the ruling principle of my people. It's now called the Republic of Benin. Now, he says, it is the source and the glory of our wealth. A mother lulls a child to sleep with the notes of triumph. The lullabies will sing over an enemy were reduced and sold in slavery.
The lullabies for babies to sleep were songs of victory.
The idea of a nation called Nigeria or a nation called Ghana or Gambia, all those kind of things, that notion, that idea did not exist anywhere. In 1807, when the Slave Trade Act was passed in Britain, the King of Bonny
Now the Niger
Niger Delta.
Niger Delta.
He was dismayed at that conclusion. And you know what he said? He said, we think this trade must go on. That is the verdict of our oracle.
Wow.
And the priests. And they say that your country, however great, can never stop a trade ordained by God himself.
God indeed.
So the idea of stopping slave trade was resisted not only by European nations, Arab nations, the entire world, even the black kings who are profiting from slave trade were like, forget it, this slavery must continue. So who are the people who first thought of us being human beings and being a nation? It was a set of people, and the prominent names are Thomas Clarkson, William Wilberforce, his friend, and a set of people called the Clapham sect in the UK. They were the ones who read the Bible. Genesis chapter 1 verse 26.
Wow.
Now look at how the idea of a nation of black people started at all. So that next time you go to Abuja, you listen to legislators, you begin to understand the price that was paid for us to even have a nation at all. Because a concept, it's even when you have a concept that a reality can follow. So the idea of a nation started with these men. They were called abolitionists. William Wilberforce was one of them. I know you people like to go on the internet a lot, so we want your generation to go on the internet. See the letter that was written by John Wesley to William Wilberforce. Wesley said, what God gave you to do, his own is small. He was an evangelist, preaching to sinners. But to get people to give up profits, financial profits, of selling black people and keeping them permanently as slaves. Wilberforce said, John Wesley wrote him a letter and said, well, if God be for you, who can be against you, just to console him. In any case, finally for William Wilberforce, 3 days before he died on the 29th of July in 1833. 3 days before he died, he witnessed something and said, thank God some things have happened. He made a comment. He said, thank God I've lived to witness a day in which England is willing to give 20 million pounds sterling for the abolition of slavery. It was in 1833. But don't forget that for 47 years, himself and these people were struggling.
It's almost half a century.
In 1807, when they first signed the Slave Trade Act, the Slave Trade Act meant that slave trade was abolished, but slavery was still allowed. You see, go and Google these names. Go and Google names like Thomas Howell Boxing, Granville Sharp. Jonathan Strong was a black slave that was his friend, a freed slave. Go and talk about the Somerset ruling. Go and Google all these things and go and find out what Anamor is. These men did not just stop up at pursuing Parliament until Parliament, royal family, everybody succumbed to the word of God. They carried no pistol, they carried no gun. The corruption they were fighting is worse than Boko Haram, worse than Fulani headsmen. These were black men in permanent servitude, no hope, treated like cattle, sold and battered and everything. But these men, using the word of God, using weapons of war that are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, wisdom better than weapons of war, divine wisdom. They succeeded to get the British government finally to give this up. After that, slave trade doubled other nations. They now persuaded Parliament to put British Navy to go and be patrolling waters, the west coast of Africa. That should any slave ship come, capture them, release the slaves, they contributed money and bought land in Africa, Freetown. It was actually called 1787, the province of freedom. This was their work. They not only did that, they now got Freetown. Thomas Howell Boxing had all night. Then he wrote a book called Slave Trade and Its Remedy. He was the one who said, look, if we can get them to organize themselves, in short, let them become nations. Let them be involved in trade, in agriculture, in produce. So he began to gather power. He spoke to the royal family. They put money together. There was an expedition in 1841. This was the fruit of his all-night prayer. when he found out that, look, let's make these people properly civilized people as they are supposed to be in God's plan. Because between Genesis chapter 1 verse 25 and Genesis chapter 1 verse 26, somebody had introduced a third thing. Neither man nor beast, but related to man and related to beast, the African, the Negro. So what are we saying here is that they started Furabe College. Zachary Macaulay.
Same school Ajayi Crowther
was the first student. Ajayi Crowther, you're a good student of history. Ajayi Crowther was the first to go to Furabe College. And I think in modern times, one of the alumni in Nigeria was Dr. Christopher Kolade. Yes. Yeah. Furabe College then was a place where they prepared people, and they are the ones who now came back. You will see, and when you look back at some of the graphics that I'm showing you there, they are the ones who came back, and they were the ones who formed what all the noise we are making in Nigeria today.
So they are the real heroes.
Listen, Ajayi Crowther was with King George of Bonny when they declared that Bonny Juju was no longer the iguana lizard. Human sacrifices were outlawed. So it was the work of these people that produced people like Ajayi Crowther, Oli Johnson, Agbebi Davis. If you just, I have some slides there. If I just go back, let me just go back to some of those slides. Agbebi Davis, you can see that. Herbert Macaulay that people are talking about was a grandson of Ajayi Crowther. Now, what people don't realize is that, let me give you some examples. Associations for the Betterment of the African Race was one of the first organizations in Nigeria. The Society for the Promotion of Religion and Education in Lagos was formed on October 1, 1873. The society was constituted by all the African clergy, ministers, and prominent laymen in the church, 108 in number. Their aim was to render the European missionaries redundant so that the CMS would withdraw them because missionaries had not been working in the interest of African independence. Now, J.P.L. Davis was the president, C.B. Macaulay, vice president, Charles Forsyth was secretary. 1879, Robert Campbell, Nathaniel King found the Lagos Mutual Improvement Society, which held public debates and lectures. Otumba Payne, J.S. Lee, Henry Johnson, J.A. Savage. All these ones were supporters of James Johnson, who was the vicar, the CMS vicar that was in, I think, Bedford then. And James Johnson himself formed the Lagos Literary and Industrial Institute in 1896 with the aim of fostering the intellectual life of Nigeria by establishing an embryo university where technical education and the arts will be taught. Otumba Payne founded the Lagos Civil Servants Prayer Union in 1887.
So these were Christians.
Labors of our heroes past does not start with Awolowo or Zik or Tafawa Balewa. It starts with white men who rejected cocaine profits, rejected everything that all their contemporaries were doing at that time. They refused to get involved. They are the first ones to think about one day when blacks will carry their own passports. They labored for it. They fought their own people. They did everything. Of course, there was also a set of freed slaves called the Sons of Africa. I will talk about that one later. If only the Igbo nation knew about Oladua Ikianu, who was kidnapped in Ihala local government area of Anambra State today. And he was taken to Virginia, sold as a slave. I think he got his freedom in 1866. Was it 1766, I think? He got his freedom. But he was the first one to write a book. And he published that book. That book was translated to about 8 different languages. The interesting narrative of Gustavus Vassa, which was his slave name. He got his freedom. And it was people like him working with one Otabas Guacano from Ghana, the famous 12. I mean, they were called the Sons of Africa in London, who worked with the abolitionists to dream of a day when we will carry our own passports, when we will have a national flag, when we too will be counted as human beings and citizens of the world instead of animals. So now today, Nigeria is back where young ladies in the younger generation
are sold as prostitutes,
going into prostitution all over the world, preferring that to living in Nigeria. Young boys, their organs are being harvested, being sold. They are being sold in markets, negotiated for $300. Now, where is the church? The truth is this. It was spirit-filled men to whom we never said thank you. William Wilberforce, his friends in the Clapham sect, and many others. They are the ones who fought for us to become a people who even have nations. Both the authorities in the mosque and the church were in support of slave trade. But these men read the Bible for themselves. Genesis chapter 1 verse 26 was their motivation. And if there's any reason today why Nigeria exists, it's because they found the first colony in Freetown. The only unfortunate thing, we'll talk about it the next time we get together, was that the British came back and took over the colony. So the original objective of their colony was corrupted again. That's why at the end of the day, Lugard and all these other people now came in. And then they continued colonialism and imperialism, protectorates and all that. That was never the plan of William Wilberforce and co. So if we have a nation called Nigeria today, you travel today with a passport, you go through immigration controls in Britain, in America, in Saudi Arabia, in Dubai, wherever it is that you're going, the idea of you, who are considered to be a goat, people are ready to sell you. Nobody wanted to stop the slave trade. And that's why underneath it continued to today, and it has returned today. So get this, without the inspiration of Genesis chapter 1 verse 26, take this from me. There were men who are ready to keep you, especially if you're of color, as beasts. Having said that, Nigeria is a leading nation. Yes. We are meant to be the giant of Africa. I think we need to go to Abuja and remind the legislators. That constitution that you're talking about anyhow. We need to talk to the governors, federal ministers. We need to talk to all those in authority. Men, the labors of our heroes past. If you know what they did to get us to be human beings, talk less of becoming a nation. And this also speaks to God-fearing men. The present day Oladua Ikianos, the present day white men of William Wilberforce, Thomas Fowler Buxton, and co. Your influence is still needed. Those are the genuine people God reckons with yesterday, today. On the screen, we have some addresses printed out. We can take calls from you. We encourage you to get in touch with us.